Sovereign meets him, realizes she's the prey species. The emptiness between worlds was Corin's refuge, a realm of silence and shadow where nothing intruded. His salvage craft clung to the battered wreck of the cargo ship Halcyon, its mechanical arms teasing relics from the debris. Inside, the hiss of recycled air and the scent of scorched wiring were his only company. Focused, Corin sliced through a sealed hatch with his torch, the blue-white arc stark against the infinite dark. He hunched forward, muscles tight, visor haloed by the faint shimmer of heat. The torch spat sparks as he traced the hatch's seam. His breath fogged the helmet's inner curve, steady and measured. He barely noticed the slow drift of panel fragments tumbling into the void beyond the porthole. All that existed was his work, the judder of metal, the groan of the hull, the faint vibration through his boots. He didn't see the distant starlight vanish, snuffed out by something vast and angular. Only when the ship's klaxons split the quiet, shrill, insistent, did Corin jerk upright, heart hammering. A Cathari warship blotted out the stars, a vessel of blackened alloy, all sharp lines and silent threat. Its hull caught the torch's gleam and warped it into cruel reflections. Before he could react, a magnetic tether slammed into his rig, the impact snapping his head back, wrenching him in his seat. The salvage arms convulsed and froze, lights flickering. He scrambled for the control board, cursing, too late. Another impact jarred the cabin. Gravity lurched. Corin's training took hold. He vented coolant into the airlock, a mist of frigid vapor hissing outward, a desperate attempt to buy himself seconds. He snatched a heavy pry bar from the tool rack and braced himself by the hatch, knuckles white. The boarders came like a storm. The first Cathari, hulking, armored, tusked, burst through the hatch, shattering the lock. The deck buckled beneath their mass. Corin fired a net from his wrist launcher, the filaments tangling the lead invader's limbs. Another Cathari lunged, tusks bared. Corin swung the pry bar, metal ringing off armor. He fought with desperate ferocity, ducking, swinging, teeth bared, but there were too many. Heavy blows rained down. A fist caught his jaw, then another to his side. Pain flared, bright and brutal. He went down, pinned beneath gauntleted hands. Darkness swallowed him. He awoke bound and battered, wrists locked behind his back with magnetic cuffs, ankles shackled. Alien voices murmured above him. Harsh light stabbed his eyes. He was dragged through corridors gleaming with alien opulence, far too grand for pirates. Inlaid metals and intricate mosaics patterned the walls. Gold filaments pulsed with shifting currents. The air was cool, tinged with the perfume of strange blossoms. Corin tried to struggle, but a boot pressed his shoulder, forcing him to shuffle. Cathari warriors lined the halls, their gazes impassive. At last he was hauled onto the bridge. Shadowy figures watched from alcoves, Cathari dignitaries or officers, their forms half concealed by diaphanous drapes. At the center, raised above the others on a wide dais, sat their leader. Lysira was both regal and fearsome, skin a pale, luminous green, neck marked with geometric imperial tattoos, hair a stark white cascade, silver eyes gleaming, pointed ears alert. Her slender frame was clad in a sculpted armored corset over a simple white tunic. She radiated command, her every motion measured, deliberate. Corin was forced to his knees before her. A guard pressed his head down, but he resisted, chin lifting, jaw set. Lysira descended from her throne, boots whispering on the glassy floor, circling him like a predator assessing prey. Most captives whimper or plead. "You fought," she said, her voice a low melody that resonated with the deck itself. Corin glared up at her. "What do they call you, human?" she pressed, stopping before him. He straightened as best he could. "Corin, and I'm not your trophy." A flicker of amusement touched her lips, cool and predatory. She crouched, bringing her face level with his. "Trophies are for display. You are an enigma." Her fingers, cool and marked by ink, traced his cheek in a gesture both intimate and assessing. She stood, turning to address her crew. "Sort the salvage, destroy the human's vessel. This one stays with me." A guard produced a dark metal band and snapped it around Corin's neck. It hummed with a low, ominous vibration. He fought down the urge to struggle. The collar bit cold against his skin. Lysira gripped his arm, guiding him from the bridge, through winding corridors, under the gaze of curious officers, into her domain. Her quarters were a study in contrast, one wall a wide viewport onto the cosmos, the others paneled in iridescent wood, the air tinged with the scent of alien blooms and charged ozone. Data screens flickered in the shadows, and a low table bore artifacts from a dozen worlds. She pushed him onto a thick, patterned rug, the texture soft beneath his knees. "Eat," she ordered, gesturing to a bowl steaming with unfamiliar food, purple grains, strips of white root, slivers of something blue. Corin stared at her, defiant. "I'm not hungry." Her eyes narrowed, but she made no move to force him. Instead, she perched on the edge of a low divan, watching him like one might watch a dangerous animal. So began their standoff. Days blurred together, measured by the cycles of artificial day and night. Lysira brought food, always fresh, always untouched. Corin sat with his back to the viewport, hunger gnawing at his insides, but he would not kneel. The collar remained, its presence a constant reminder. He watched her, the way she moved before the star charts, gestures sharp and precise, the tension in her shoulders as she traced routes through enemy territory, the sighs that escaped her lips when she thought herself alone. She was not just a conqueror, he realized, but a ruler, isolated, burdened by responsibility. Sometimes, in the dead hours, she lingered at the viewport, fingers pressed to the glass, gaze far away. Her frustration grew. She paced, lips compressed, temper simmering just beneath her regal mask. At last, she confronted him, voice taut with irritation. "Why do you resist?" she demanded, looming over him. "Strength commands obedience. I am stronger. You yield." Corin met her eyes, voice ragged from thirst and pride. "That's not our way," he rasped. "Humans value dignity, self-worth." She scoffed, turning away as if dismissing his words. But they lingered, casting shadows across her features. On the fifth night, as storms flickered in the void beyond the glass, Lysira's patience snapped. She strode across the room, seized him by the collar, and pinned him to the floor, her grip unyielding, her breath hot on his face. For a moment, they struggled, her strength overwhelming, his resistance fierce. Skin met skin. The contact sent a surge of warmth jolting through her, a sensation that startled her to stillness. Cathari did not feel such things. Bonding, comfort. These were foreign concepts, soft and dangerous. Yet now, with Corin pinned beneath her, something inside her shuddered and bloomed. She recoiled, shaken, rising abruptly to her feet, hand pressed to her chest, as if to steady a racing heart. Corin looked up at her, bruised and breathless, but saw the crack in her armor, a tremor of doubt, a glimpse of something raw and human. For a long moment neither spoke, and in the silence, the space between them changed. Lysira tried to act as if nothing had changed, but everything had. She avoided touching Corin now, her movements suddenly cautious where before they had been commanding, dismissive. Yet her gaze lingered, silver eyes drifting back to him as if drawn by gravity. When she spoke, her words came clipped and formal, her posture rigid, but something had unraveled inside her. Corin's presence unsettled her, a craving she couldn't name, a distraction she could not expel. Corin watched her with the patience of someone who had been prey and was now something else, an anomaly, perhaps even a mirror. He noticed the way her fingers twitched when she passed him food, the way her voice softened when she thought no one listened. He noticed, too, that Lysira seemed lonelier than before, her isolation made sharper by the memory of skin against skin. The days aboard the warship stretched, taut and tense. Lysira's second, Sarek, noticed the change as well. He was broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, his imperial tattoos twisting down his jaw in harsh black lines. He confronted Lysira one morning as she reviewed star maps, voice low but urgent. "The crew whispers sovereign," Sarek warned, a note of accusation threading through his words. "They say you keep the human as a pet." "This is not our tradition." "My ways are my own," Lysira replied, voice brittle with authority. But Corin, listening from his corner of the quarters, heard the uncertainty beneath her command. Sarek bowed, but his eyes narrowed, suspicion curdling in the air as he retreated. Lysira did not look at Corin, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Corin sensed the shift, the opening in her armor. He began to speak, not with defiance but with gentle persistence, offering questions instead of resistance. One evening, as she brought him a bowl of fragrant stew, he nodded to the pale scars webbing her knuckles. "Were you born to rule, or did you have to fight for it?" Lysira hesitated. For a heartbeat she almost left the question unanswered, but then she knelt beside him, her armor creaking. "Every Cathari fights. The marks are a record of victories." Her fingers flexed, as if remembering the pain. Corin's voice was soft. Was the fight worth it? She looked at him, eyes shadowed. It was necessary. The last word tasted bitter. He let the silence stretch, then asked about the stars, the engines that throbbed beneath their feet, the way she plotted their course through contested space. Sometimes she answered with clipped facts. Other times, when her guard slipped, she shared more. How the ship's core hummed with a voice she could almost hear, how she missed the scent of rain on her homeworld. At night, when Lysira thought him asleep, Corin studied her, saw the way she paced, restless, before the viewport. She was a woman trapped by her own legend, the weight of a crown that had never fit. Sarek grew restless too. He watched their shifting dynamic, saw Lysira's silences, the way she hovered near the human. He began to gather loyalists, whispers curling through the ranks. The air aboard the ship grew sharper, the tension near breaking. One cycle, as Lysira negotiated with a rival captain on the bridge, her voice cold, her eyes never leaving the holoscreen, Sarek moved. He strode into her quarters flanked by two lieutenants, boots ringing on the iridescent floor. Corin, tinkering with the remains of a broken communicator, looked up, suspicion flaring. Sarek's smile was cold. "She will thank me for ending this," he sneered, eyes glittering with malice. Corin surged to his feet as Sarek advanced. The lieutenants flanked the exit. Sarek lunged, hands closing around Corin's throat, driving him back against the wall. Corin fought, twisting, his pulse roaring in his ears. He kicked out, catching Sarek's knee, but the Cathari was strong, armored. The edges of Corin's vision flickered black. A silent alarm triggered, the collar at Corin's neck pulsing red. The doors slid open with a hiss. Lysira arrived, a tempest incarnate, eyes blazing, voice slicing through the chaos. "Stand down!" Her command was absolute. Her loyalists surged into the room. Lysira seized Sarek by the collar, her strength shocking. She hurled him aside, his body crashing into the table, artifacts scattering. Her loyalists subdued the traitors in a flurry of blows and shouts, dragging them to their knees. Lysira knelt by Corin, her face inches from his. She touched his cheek, her hand trembling as that addictive warmth flooded her. Fire and longing and a fierce protectiveness that frightened her. She realized with a shock that her need for him was no longer about power, no longer about domination or ownership, but about connection. The ache in her chest was not weakness, but something dangerously close to love. Corin coughed, gasping for breath, but managed a wry smile. Guess I'm not as easy to kill as I look. Lysira's lips twisted in a grim approximation of a smile, relief and rage warring in her eyes. She turned to her loyalists. Lock Sarek in the lower hold. Anyone who aided him will answer to me. The air between Corin and Lysira crackled with tension after Sarek's defeat. Everything was different. Every glance a dare, every touch charged. Lysira found reasons to be near him, to touch him under the guise of instruction, her hands lingering on his shoulders as she demonstrated the controls of a star chart, her breath warm against his ear as she corrected his pronunciation of Cathari words. She claimed it was necessity, preparing him for service, for usefulness, but both knew it was more. Corin learned to read her moods, the subtle shifts in her eyes and the tension of her jaw. He learned how to soothe her cravings for closeness, a steady hand on her wrist, a whispered word in the dark. The balance of power shifted between them, fluid and uncertain. Lysira was drawn to him, seeking solace she could not admit. One night, with the ship adrift in a rare pocket of calm, they sat together on the thick rug, knees almost touching. Lysira reached for him, her fingers tracing the fading bruises on his neck, each mark a memory. "Your kind is fragile," she murmured, voice barely more than a breath, "but not easily broken." Corin met her eyes, his own hand rising to cover hers. "We adapt," he said quietly, threading his fingers through hers. She shivered at the contact, silver eyes widening in wonder. "We survive. That's its own strength." She stared at their joined hands, as if seeing something sacred. "You have changed me, Corin," she whispered, her voice raw. "I do not know if it is for the better." He squeezed her hand, gentle but sure. "That's the only way we move forward. Together." For the first time, Lysira let herself lean into him, her forehead resting against his. She confided in him, her rise to power, the battles she had fought, the betrayals that haunted her nights. She spoke of the rival clans who plotted her downfall, of the heavy secrets hidden in the ship's walls. Corin listened, absorbing every detail, every fear, every hope she dared to share. He began to plan, too. When alone, he fashioned tools from scraps, metal filaments twisted into lockpicks, shards of glass honed into blades, circuits soldered into secret transmitters. He mapped the routines of the guards, memorized the layout of the quarters, noted the times when Lysira was called away. He was no longer just a captive. He was her confidant, her ally, perhaps even her salvation. And with every secret shared, every touch exchanged, the line between prisoner and partner blurred, until it was gone entirely, and only possibility remained. The calm shattered with a ship-wide alert, red lights pulsing, alarms stabbing through every corridor. Lysira's quarters lit up with emergency strobes, slicing the dimness with fevered urgency. Overhead, the ship's AI spoke in a flat, unfeeling tone. "Containment breach on the drive deck. All security personnel respond." Lysira shot to her feet, every line of her body tense. "A ruse! Sarek!" she spat, eyes narrowing, voice low and lethal. Corin saw her scan the room, the sealed doors, the blinking panel by the frame. Sarek had locked them in. Mutiny. He moved to the viewport, eyes searching for any escape route, but they were high above the ship's core, encased in thick hull and protocol. The doors glowed a sullen red, locked, dead to every override. Sparks burst from the maintenance hatch near the ceiling, showering the rug with angry orange fragments. The acrid tang of burning insulation filled the air. Lysira's hand went to the curved blade at her hip, her knuckles bone-white around the hilt. Corin's mind raced through options, calculating, discarding. From behind the smoking hatch, Sarek's voice rang out, cold and triumphant. "Your reign ends, Lysira. Your weakness has doomed us." The hatch blew inward with a shriek of rending metal. Sarek dropped through, arm braced with cybernetic plating, eyes burning with zeal. 4 warriors followed, their armor etched with Sarek's crest, loyalists, all muscle and murder. Lysira stepped into their path, blade up, head high. "You overstep," she said, her voice echoing off the iridescent walls. Sarek sneered, leveling a pulse weapon at her chest. "You let this human poison us. We serve the strong. Surrender, or die as a traitor." Corin scanned the room, mind mapping every wire, every exposed circuit. "Lysira," he warned, but she was already moving, a predator meeting the challenge. Sarek's men surged forward, weapons crackling, boots grinding the shards of the hatch. Lysira met them head-on, blade flashing in an arc of silver, but they pressed her back, numbers overwhelming. Corin ripped a panel from the wall, hands flying over the tangle of wires. He yanked out a capacitor, jammed 2 lengths of conduit together. The circuit sparked, humming with stored energy. A makeshift EMP, raw and unstable. He slammed it against the deck and ducked. A shockwave rippled through the room. Lights died. Weapons sizzled and went dark. For an instant, the only illumination came from the emergency strobes, stuttering red shadows over everything. In the gloom, only Lysira's eyes glowed, silver and predatory. "Now!" Corin shouted. He moved, quick and deliberate. One of Sarek's men lunged at him. Corin sidestepped, slamming a heavy chair into the attacker's gut, then brought an elbow up, cracking the warrior's jaw. The man went down hard, groaning. Lysira fought like a shadow, moving with lethal grace. She ducked a wild swing, caught an arm, twisted, and drove her blade into the gap of armor at the warrior's side. He collapsed without a sound. Sarek bellowed, charging for Lysira, cybernetic arm raised. Corin dove between 2 of the remaining loyalists, catching one by the ankle and dragging him to the floor. They grappled, rolling through debris, fists flying. The Cathari was bigger, but Corin fought with desperate precision, an edge honed by survival. He drove his knee into the man's throat, and the loyalist dropped, gasping. The last of Sarek's men squared off with Lysira. She darted in, fainted, then spun low, sweeping the warrior's legs. He crashed to the floor and she knocked him out with the hilt of her blade. In the chaos, Sarek circled, pulse weapon useless, cybernetic fist clenching. "You could have ruled, Lysira," he snarled, voice hoarse. "Instead, you grovel before a human. You disgrace our blood." Corin saw Sarek's focus, rage locked on Lysira, blind to everything else. Corin circled behind him, quiet as a shadow, and kicked the back of Sarek's knee. Sarek staggered, stumbled forward. Lysira pounced, blade at his throat, eyes blazing. Sarek bared his tusks, defiant even in defeat. "Kill me, or you'll never rule them again." Lysira's blade pressed deeper. "You chose your fate," she whispered, and drove the blade home. Quick, decisive. Sarek collapsed, his body hitting the deck with a final hollow thud. Silence fell, broken only by Corin's ragged breathing and the hum of emergency power. Lysira turned, shoulders heaving. Her hands trembled as she scanned the aftermath. Her loyalists alive, Sarek and his followers defeated. She moved to Corin, her composure shredded, eyes wide with something raw and unfamiliar. She reached for the collar at his throat, fingers fumbling at the hidden clasp. For a moment, she hesitated, as if afraid the act might undo everything she had built. But then she pressed the release, and the collar clattered to the floor. The marks it had left were red, angry lines circling his neck. Her touch was feather-light, tracing those marks as if to erase them. Her eyes met his, vulnerable and searching. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Corin caught her hand, guiding it to rest against his throat, letting her feel the thrum of his pulse. "I chose you," he said, voice hoarse. "You're not alone in this." The heat between them was no longer sharp and uncertain, but a deep, steady thrum, belonging. Lysira leaned in, her breath mingling with his, and for the first time since they had met, she let herself fall. Their kiss was fierce, urgent, a collision of worlds, a surrender and a claim. She crushed him against her, fingers tangled in his hair, her armor cold against his skin. Corin answered her with equal need, hands roving her back, their bodies pressed together in desperate affirmation. In that moment, the conqueror yielded to the captive and found freedom. Later on the bridge, the crew gathered in wary silence. Lysira sat in the command chair, her back straight, her gaze unwavering. Corin stood at her side, his hand resting on her shoulder, a silent claim none dared challenge. The bridge crew glanced between them, uncertain, but no one spoke. Lysira glanced up, meeting Corin's eyes. He squeezed her shoulder, and she leaned back, brushing her cheek against his fingers. She, the supreme hunter, had been captured, and had never felt so free. 3 months later, the ship's culture had changed. The bridge was quieter, the hum of routine punctuated by clipped orders and swift, silent compliance. Discipline, once enforced with a heavy hand, now moved like an undercurrent, a steady tide that swept through every deck and corridor. Lysira sat in the command seat, her presence as imposing as ever, but something in the set of her shoulders had softened. At her right hand stood Corin, dressed in simple gray fatigues. He bore no visible weapons, wore no insignia, yet the respect that flowed toward him was palpable. Where once suspicion had curled at his feet, now the crew passed with nods or quiet words, accepting the human's influence as part of the ship's strange new rhythm. The tactical display flickered to life, painting sharp lines across the air. A convoy, 3 swift escorts flanking a heavy freighter, shields glimmering with military-grade signatures. The officers gathered, casting wary glances at Lysira and at Corin. Vera, the new second-in-command, stepped forward, her face marked by the gold streaks of recent promotion. "A direct attack would be costly," she said, crisp and precise. "Their flanking vessels have missile pods. The freighter's shields are reinforced." Dax, the chief engineer, chimed in, fingers dancing over a portable console. "Their shield output is nearly double standard cargo. We'd burn through too much power for a frontal assault." Corin studied the display, weighing options. He waited, letting the silence draw out, then spoke quietly. "We have their service codes from the last raid. If we send a disguised shuttle, plant a virus in their shield controls, we can trigger a cascade failure. The shields drop for a minute and a half. We strike then. Fast, precise, no unnecessary bloodshed." The Cathari officers stiffened. Vera's eyes flashed, her voice sharp with challenge. "We face our foes openly. Deceit is not our way." Corin met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "And you lose warriors every time. My way, everyone survives. Shields are down just long enough for us to take the cargo and go. No heroics, no funerals." Dax grunted, considering. The virus could work. The window would be narrow but possible. Murmurs rippled across the bridge. Some officers bristled, others seemed thoughtful. Lysira sat, watching the exchange, silent, calculating. At last, she gave the order. "Prepare the arrow for launch. Vera, you lead the strike. Corin, go with her. You know the enemy's systems." A hush fell. For the sovereign to send her consort on a battle run was a public sign of trust, one not lost on anyone present. Corin nodded. "We'll be ready." As the officers dispersed, Corin lingered by the tactical display, marking the timing of the convoy's orbit, the gap between escorts. Lysira's eyes followed him, unreadable. Later, in the mess, Corin spread blueprints and code sequences across a table. The space felt transformed. Gone were the days of jealously guarded spoils, rationed fuel, and half-hearted meals. Now, the crew ate together, sharing stories, laughter, and the bounty of their raids. Merit, not rank, determined reward. Maintenance teams moved with purpose, and the food, never luxurious, had improved in quality and quantity. Even the old grumblers had softened, their complaints replaced by grudging approval. Vera slid into the seat across from him, her posture wary. "You're changing us," she said quietly. "Not all of us are sure it's for the better." Corin offered a small, tired smile. "Change isn't easy, but it's survival. Fairness makes you stronger." She hesitated but then nodded, her eyes flicking over the plans. "The Arrow's engines are ready. Your virus, is it stable?" "As stable as it gets," he replied, sliding her the data chip. "You run point. I'll handle the shield drop. The rest is just timing." Across the mess, Lysira entered. She paused, searching for him amid the crowd. Their eyes met, a silent exchange passing between them. Mutual respect, a promise made wordlessly. She turned away, but her presence lingered at the edge of his thoughts. Preparations for the strike moved quickly. The Arrow, a sleek, unmarked shuttle, was prepped and loaded with a small, hand-picked team. Vera briefed them, her voice steady, her instructions echoing Corin's strategy. There was an undercurrent of skepticism, but no open dissent. As launch time approached, Lysira intercepted Corin in the corridor outside the hangar. She blocked his path, her expression thunderous. "You undermine me," she accused, voice pitched low for his ears alone. "You make them question tradition. They whisper about the sovereign who hides behind human tricks." Corin met her anger with calm. "I make them stronger," he said. "Your people are precious. Why waste them? This is my strength. Now yours too." She glared, but the fire in her eyes was uncertain, not furious. "You would have me abandon everything that made us conquerors." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "No, I would have you lead them into a future where they don't have to die for pride. Where they win, not just survive. You are the sovereign, the storm. But even a storm needs a calm at its heart." She hesitated, searching his face for any sign of mockery. Finding none, she let her shoulders drop, the fight leaking from her frame. Corin reached for her, drawing her down into an embrace, his touch gentle but sure. Their lips met, soft at first, then hungry, a dance of dominance and surrender, a new game where he was master of her longing. When they parted, Lysira's breath was ragged. "Return to me," she murmured. "Whole." "Always," he promised. The raid went off with surgical precision. Vera's team slipped the Arrow into the convoy's shadow, broadcasting stolen codes. Corin uploaded the virus. When the signal was triggered, the convoy's shields flickered, collapsed, a golden window opening. The Cathari swept in, disabling engines, subduing the guards without a single casualty. The crew moved as one, efficient and ruthless, but without the old brutality. When it was done, the hold brimmed with supplies and not a drop of blood had been spilled. In the afterglow, celebration filled the mess, voices raised in song and laughter. For the first time, Corin felt no lingering suspicion, only acceptance. He caught Vera's gaze. She nodded in approval. Even the most skeptical officers relaxed, some offering toasts in his honor. That night, in their quarters, tension simmered anew. Lysira paced the floor, armored boots thudding softly against the iridescent panels. Corin lounged on the bed, exhaustion in his bones but a smile on his lips. She turned on him, frustration and longing tangled in her words. "You change everything. You make them question me. You make me uncertain." He stood, crossing to her. "You're changing, Lysira. That's what real strength is. You're not weaker, you're wiser. You see your people as more than weapons. Why waste them?" She frowned, torn. "I am supposed to be the storm that conquers. Now they see me hesitate." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Even a storm needs an anchor. Let me be that for you." She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him. He kissed her, slow and deep, their bodies pressing together, the passion between them dark and sweet. Their kiss became a dance, Her dominance, his calm, her hunger, his patience. They fell together, not as captor and captive, but as equals who had chosen one another, over and over. Later, entwined in the soft glow of the viewport, Corin traced the geometric tattoos on her back. His fingertips followed their sharp, beautiful lines, pausing at the scar that Sarek had left on him months before. Lysira's hand covered his, her grip fierce, guilt flickering in her eyes. "He hurt you," she said quietly. Corin smiled, turning her palm to his lips and kissing it. "And you showed him the cost." "We did." He squeezed her hand, anchoring her to the present. "It's not weakness, Lysira. It's an anchor. The human way." She struggled to understand, but let him guide her through this new world. And in the silence, in the warmth of his embrace, she found a peace she had never known, a calm at the heart of the storm. The arrow approached the convoy, a speck against the void, just another ghost on the black, nothing to draw suspicion. On the Sovereign, hidden behind the cratered shadow of a barren moon, every eye was glued to the tactical displays, every breath held in collective anticipation. This was not the Cathari way. No battle roar, no cannon's thunder, only patience and silent faith in a human's plan. Corin sat at the shuttle's helm, hands steady on the controls. The cockpit's glow limned his face in blue and green, the gentle hum of the engines echoing the rhythm of his heart. "Transponder code holding, docking in 30 seconds, he murmured, voice calm but taut with focus. Behind him, Lysira stood silent, her armored hand resting on the back of his chair. The gesture was wordless, but spoke to everyone watching. A sovereign's trust, public and absolute. Her presence was a shield at his back. On the convoy's central freighter, Vera and her partner, both disguised in bland merchant grays, slipped past a board security drone. Vera's eyes swept corridors lined with cargo crates and humming shield generators. Every movement was rehearsed, every gesture precise. In a maintenance alcove, her partner cracked open a panel, sliding in the virus-laden data chip. Vera covered him, posture loose but eyes flinty. On the Sovereign's bridge, Dax hunched over his console, breath held, watching the infiltration through a shaky helmet feed. "The nerve," he whispered, half admiration, half disbelief. Lysira, her pride unmistakable, straightened, her voice ringing across the bridge. "He is human. They conquer not with force, but with ingenuity." She met every skeptical gaze with her own unwavering one, making clear where her allegiance lay. Her silver eyes, though, remained on Corin. The arrow's calm crackled. "Virus planted, returning to the arrow," Vera reported, her words clipped and businesslike. Corin's lips twitched in a faint smile. He glanced at Lysira. "All clear, just as we planned." She leaned in, her voice low and intimate, meant only for him. "You make this look easy." He shrugged, not taking his eyes from the instruments. "Just a little borrowed time. The hard part's next." Lysira straightened, turning to face the assembled bridge crew. Her voice shifted, no longer the private warmth she reserved for Corin, but the command of a sovereign. "All stations, prepare for shadow jump. Weapons ready. Target engines, not hulls. Take the prize intact." The crew moved with purpose, old habits now inflected with new discipline. Vera's strike team jogged back through the freighter's corridors, blending with dock workers until they reached the arrow. Within the shuttle, Corin's hands danced over the controls, prepping the ship for rapid disengagement. Dax's eyes flicked to Lysira. "Window for virus trigger is tight. Once it activates, we have less than 2 minutes." Corin's voice was steady. "We'll make it." Lysira moved to his side, her presence electric. They stood close, shoulders brushing, the tension between them a living thing. For a moment, the bridge and its crew faded. The universe shrank to the heat of her arm against his. The echo of battles survived together. "Ready for the chase, my heart?" Corin whispered. The words barely carried over the ambient hum. Lysira turned to him, her silver eyes shining with the promise of battle and something deeper. She drew him close, fingers curled in the fabric of his collar, and kissed him, fierce, unhidden, a sovereign's declaration. The crew stared, startled, but none dared question. When she pulled away, her voice was low and fierce. "With you, I am always hunting," she murmured. Corin grinned, heart pounding, and turned to his console, fingers flying over the final sequence. On the tactical display, the convoy slid into perfect alignment, a line of prey caught in the dark. Lysira straightened, the sovereign incarnate, her authority now a blend of Cathari strength and human cunning, her command absolute. Her voice rang through the bridge, a blade drawn in the silence. "Mark!" she ordered. Outside, the arrow peeled away from the convoy as the virus activated. Shield signatures flickered, collapsed in a dance of blue and gold. In that breathless span, the Sovereign leaped from its hiding place, engines howling. Cathari gunners targeted engines, not hulls, disabling ships with surgical precision. The convoy crews barely had time to signal distress before the Cathari boarded, swift and efficient. No blood spilled, no unnecessary violence. On the arrow's screens, Corin watched it unfold, pride swelling at the seamless execution of their plan. He caught Lysira's eye, and she gave him a nod, equal parts approval and adoration. Veyra's voice came through the comm, breathless but exultant. "Boarding complete. Cargo secure. No casualties." Lysira smiled, a rare and brilliant expression. "Bring them in. All crews stand down. Prepare for inventory." Dax let out a shaky laugh, the tension draining from his frame. "We did it. By the void, we actually did it." As the arrow docked with the Sovereign, Corin lingered in the cockpit, eyes lingering on the stars beyond. Lysira joined him, sliding her arms around his waist. For a moment, they stood in the hush after chaos, alone in a universe remade by trust and daring. "You were right," she said quietly, her breath warm at his ear. "Your way is not weakness." Corin turned, pressing his forehead to hers. "It's not my way anymore," he murmured. "It's ours." She smiled, a softer, private thing, before leading him out to greet the returning victors. In the corridor, crew members paused, offering nods of respect. Where there had once been suspicion, there was now camaraderie. Where there had been division, now unity. Back on the bridge, Lysira resumed her command seat, drawing Corin to stand beside her. She took his hand openly, fingers lacing through his. The gesture was both challenge and promise. The crew watched, silent, as Lysira raised her voice once more. No longer only Cathari, no longer only conqueror, but something new. A sovereign who hunted with the heart and mind of two worlds. The stars awaited, and with a single word, she led them forward. The sovereign dropped from shadow space, engines howling as she materialized above the unsuspecting convoy. Lysira's voice rang out, crisp and commanding. "All batteries fire precision only." The gunners responded in unison. The hull shuddered with unleashed power, but the volley was exact, overwhelming. The convoy's shields flared, then collapsed, overtaxed by the perfectly timed strike. Alarms wailed across the freighter and its escorts, but there was no chaos. Just surrender as their engines and weapons went dark, disabled, but intact. On the bridge, Lysira stood in the center of the storm she had orchestrated, Corin beside her, steady as her shadow. Veyra's team swept through the disabled ships, swift and efficient. They encountered no resistance, only stunned crew, hands raised in shock, not defiance. When the last hold was secured, Veyra's voice burst through the comm. "Objective complete. Convoy neutralized. All assets secure, no casualties. The roar from the Sovereign's crew was primal, exhilaration tinged with disbelief. This was victory, but not of the old breed. Not a massacre, not a pyre of glory or shame. This was something new, bloodless, cunning, whole. The corridors thrummed with energy as the news spread. Crewmates clapped each other on the back, exchanged grins, boasted and cheered. Even those old enough to remember Lysira's father's reign could not deny the thrill of this triumph. Corin watched from the bridge as the cargo manifest scrolled across the screens: food, water, alloys, medicine, tech. The haul was rich, but more important, no lives lost, no friends or foes to mourn. He caught Dax's eye at engineering and received a rare nod of approval. In the aftermath, the Sovereign felt alive in a new way. The mess hall was filled with laughter and the clatter of spoons against bowls. The victory was a tide that lifted all, Cathari and human alike. The old guard grumbled in corners, muttering about tradition and lost honor, but their voices were drowned out by the surge of celebration. Where once the Cathari had prized only brute force, now they embraced this sharper edge, predator and strategist, strength and subtlety, now united. Later, Dax sought Corin out in the corridor, his bearing a little less stiff. "Not bad, human. The ships never run so smooth." Corin grinned. "Just keeping up with Cathari standards." Dax snorted, but there was respect behind the sound. "That, and something new. Keep at it." Elsewhere, Vera lingered in the mess, recounting the mission with her team. "The Sovereign trusts the human, so do I," she declared, raising her mug. Others followed, some hesitantly, some with fierce pride. Night fell, or as close to night as artificial cycles allowed. In their quarters, Lysira and Corin lay side by side, the darkness lit by starlight streaming through the wide viewport. For a long while, they simply breathed together, equal, at peace, the ship's muted celebrations a distant hum. Lysira traced the fading bruise on Corin's jaw with gentle fingers, her touch reverent, almost afraid. "You have changed everything," she whispered. Her voice was quieter than battle, but more dangerous, vulnerable, intimate. Corin shifted, turning to face her. He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips, then drew her close until her head rested on his chest. "And so have you," he replied, his words warm in the hush between them. She smiled, a small, uncertain curve. "I never imagined this. Not for myself. Not for my crew." He stroked her hair, his own bruises almost forgotten. "No one ever does, until it happens. You gave them more than victory, Lysira. You gave them a future." She looked up at him, eyes glimmering silver in the dark. "You gave that to me." Their kiss was slow, deep, a promise of storms and new journeys, of battles to come and the peace between them. It was not a conquering, not surrender, but a mutual yielding, a trust built from scars and longing, healed in the quiet between each heartbeat. Later, when the ship quieted and the revelry faded, Lysira and Corin stood together on the bridge. The crew watched with new respect, some with awe, others with quiet calculation, all with acceptance. Where once Corin had been a symbol of doubt or derision, now he was a fixture, not a captive, nor a possession, but a peer. Vera stepped forward, her bearing formal, her pride clear. "The convoy is secure, no casualties, all assets accounted for." Lysira inclined her head, the gesture both acknowledgement and gratitude. Her hand settled on Corin's, fingers lacing with his for all the crew to see. In that simple gesture, something unspoken shifted. He was her equal, her consort, her anchor. She looked out over her officers, her voice clear and strong. "This is our new way. Strength does not mean waste. Power is more than fear. A murmur of assent rippled through the room. Even the old guard seemed to pause, considering. Corin felt the gaze of the crew, the shift in their posture, the way the Cathari held themselves now, proud but not rigid, alert but not anxious. He squeezed Lysira's hand, grounding her, and she squeezed back, a silent promise. The void, once cold and indifferent, now shimmered with possibility. The sovereign prowled the stars, not as a beast in search of prey, but as a force with purpose, guided by two hearts that beat in unlikely rhythm. Word spread from world to world, port to port, of the sovereign and her human consort, the supreme hunter who had been captured by her prey, and in that capture found the freedom to become more than she had ever dreamed. Together, they were unstoppable. The hunt had changed, and so had the hunters. And as the sovereign carved her path among the stars, a new legend was born, not just of conquest, but of transformation, of two souls remaking a kingdom and each other, one victory at a time. That's the end of the story. You can leave us a tip or become a channel member. This greatly helps our team improve the quality of our videos. You can send a tip using the Super Thanks button right below the video. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who has subscribed and supported us. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.